Hello everyone, Sanjay here. So in this video, I want to talk about the fact that there might be two Archons in Inazuma. Now, of course, with that said, this is going to be a spoiler video. I might end up spoiling part of the 2.1 Archon questline. So you have been warned. If you do not want to watch this video, please skip. Now, for those of you that are staying, because most of you who clicks this video probably already knows the hypothesis that Miko is the other Archon or the original Archon or something like that. Basically, that is the theory I'm going off here. And basically, like what I normally do, I talk about conclusion first, and afterwards I go into the details. So that's going to be the theory I talk about. However, one thing to note here, when I say Archon, I mean the Chinese definition of Archon, which is different from the English translation of Archon, apparently for some reason. In the Chinese definition, the Archon literally means anyone with Archon level power. So in the Chinese definition, people like Guizhang, like Osile, like Havria, basically all of them are considered Archons. Now, for example, in the English version, Osile's official translation is Overlord of the Vortex. In the Chinese translation, in the Chinese original text, the original one, if you are directly translating, would be translating to Archon of the Vortex instead. So that is the Archon definition I'm going by. So not necessarily someone holding the gnosis. For that position, I'll be using the 7 to basically denote that that person is actually holding a gnosis. And when I say Archon, I generally mean someone with Archon level power. It's not really an actual name tag or status, it's just sort of a measure of a being's power. So that will be what I use for the rest of the video. Just want to get that clear. So one thing I want to know before I started, just want to say that Inazuma's questline, I know I made a rant about it about a week ago. However, after going through it, I believe that I would like to apologize for saying that probably I did not actually understand some of the questlines while going through it. However, after all going through all these role quests and everything, it seems to make me understand that the story writers are very smart in the case that they set up a lot of hints, a lot of cliffhangers, a lot of hidden threads throughout the stories of Inazuma, which are all going to come together with the 2.1 Archon quest, and I'm personally very excited about it. So with that said, let's get started. So basically, the reason why Inazuma's storyline is so much more interesting than Liyue and Mondstadt is because in Liyue and Mondstadt, everyone knows there is a unified story. Basically, in Liyue, it's how Zhongli, the Morax/Rex Lepus, cleared out everything and made the people of Liyue their life easier and things here and there. Whereas in Inazuma, it's currently in a very chaotic situation. So with this, we have a lot of different versions of stories coming from different people, and this is why it makes it very interesting, because within those different versions we're able to construct a pretty objective story from it rather than listen to Venti and Johnny's very subjective version of what they did. I mean, they probably most likely did those, but again, it's a single-sided story which tends to be biased in most cases. And finally, I want to say this is not a leak, this is a personal speculation. However, if I did manage to hit some of the details or even some of the major plots within 2.1, please do not call me a leaker. This is again personal speculation, and if you do that, please come back and call me a spoiler, and that's what I will say. So basically, this is not a leak, this is just a personal speculation. And also finally, this took a lot of reading and research, so if you can drop a like or consider subscribing, I would be greatly appreciated. So with that, let's get started. So the point I want to make here, again, conclusions first, is that Inazuma have two Archons. Again, here I mean have two Archon level power level character present in Inazuma at the case. Of course, one of them is the Raiden Shogun. Another thing to note, for Raiden Shogun, I'll be calling her Raiden Shogun for the rest of the story because I believe actually Baal is someone else, not her at the moment. So that's why I'll be calling her Raiden Shogun instead. And whenever I say Shogun, it refers to her. And the other person who is considered an Archon in Inazuma is, of course, Miko, or Guji Yai, depends on what name you go by for her. And she might actually be the real Electro Archon or the previous Electro Archon. Basically, she achieved Venti's dream in the sense that Venti was pretty much just leaving everything single-handedly to the Knights of Favonius, i.e. Jin. Whereas in Yae Miko's case, she basically got even more free and handed over the Gnosis and was like, I'll just stay here and chill. That's basically the difference between those two. So now I want to get into all the points that kind of proves this, because I know, of course, most of our definition so far goes by the story that the statue of the 1,000 hand, 100 arm, I believe, or 1,000 arm, 100 hand. I don't remember exactly, but the 1,000 something god, the statue of the god with all the vision inside it looks like Yae Miko. That's basically the reason why we're going after. But I believe I found quite a few more reasons that might make sense that why Yae Miko is the real or the ex-Electro Archon. So with that said, let's first talk about the fact that the actual Electro Archon we fought and met, the real one, is the real Electro Archon with a Gnosis on her. Here are the reasons. First, the MC has only been defeated twice so far. Once by, of course, the Herrscher of the Void in the opening cutscene, and the second one by Raiden Shogun. Now, of course, there's one I didn't count, which is La Senora's ambush, but that is considered ambush, so that does not count. These are the only two times where the MC is actually defeated by someone head-on. And during these two times, one thing in common is that they are both using powers from Celestia, one form or another. Basically, during the initial fight scene, we know that we're actually in Celestia, so someone who comes in there uses the power from Celestia. And for this one, the Raiden Shogun actually has her name tag written under it, one of the 7 Archons, Archon of Electro, so she is using power from Celestia, i.e. the Gnosis, when fighting with us, so this is already clear. Another thing that is clear that they are both from Celestia is that there is one symbol in common between these two. Now, of course, I have to talk about the PV. It's similar to the PV that will be reunited, but basically during that PV, here's the cutscene here, that Kamisato was destroyed by the Archons. And as we can see the sister Lumin running through this, we can see that there are tentacles made up of those particles that the Herrscher of the Void, that's what I'll be calling her now, has released. It's very similar to the particles she used to fight us in the beginning cutscene, which means that we can link that the destruction of Kamisato to her, and which means she is from Celestia. And another reason behind this is now we can link her, because we originally linked the particles to her, and now we can link her to the black sun or planet or star, I don't know what it is, but the black round object behind Lumin while she was running through Celestia. That is the other thing that links that fight and this fight together, because when the Archon before the fight with Baal started, there is actually a giant cutscene where they basically give a super close-up of that giant star behind you. So that means these two are using the same source of power because they have the same source of background. Otherwise, MiHoYo would not leave this hint in. So I believe this is why the Archon we're fighting is the real one. And who is the other Archon? Of course, it's Yae Miko. And she is not the active Archon in the sense that Zhongli is no longer the Geo Archon. He is dead. Rex Lapis is dead, and Zhongli walks the earth as a normal human. Same case here. The old Raiden Shogun is dead, and Yae Miko is just the priestess of the Narukami Shrine. So that is what I want to talk about first. For the rest of the video, I'll be telling you the reasons why I think Yae Miko is the actual God of Thunder or God of Lightning or the Electro Archon, or at least the previous version of the Electro Archon. Now first, let's refer to the actual IRL reference of Japanese mythology, which of course Genshin's entire Inazuma side of Archon setup is based after. So in the Japanese definition, the god of Electro, or they don't have the word Electro, or in this case, they're the god of thundering. Thunder is also the god of lightning, the god of swords, the god of knives, as well as the god of bow and arrows. He is also the god of war. Sound familiar? Basically, the current Electro Archon is very war-ish and likes to fight people and stuff like that. That is very familiar. The god of thunder can generally be recognized by the ring symbol behind him. There is generally a ring, and on those rings are threaded by a bunch of small drums, and on each surface, front surface and back surface of the drum, is covered with 3 magatama, which is these comma-shaped symbols. They're used in both Chinese and Japanese. Also, in Chinese, they're generally used as the yin and yang symbol. Basically, if you put a circle in there, it's the yin and yang symbol. And in Japanese, they normally appear in forms of 3 instead of forms of 2 compared to the Chinese ones. And MiHoYo followed up this feature from the previous Japanese mythology reference, just like many other mangas and games did, except in MiHoYo's case, during the Archon cutscene, where we can see there was a giant ring behind the Electro Archon riding Shogun. During that scene, the rings is still there, the drums are replaced with the eyes, and the magatamas are replaced with the electro symbol of Inazuma, which is actually transformed from 3 magamatas, which is why the electro symbol is sort of like that. That explains why. So this is the reason I'm drawing the parallel here is to confirm that this ring of drums / eyes with magatamas on them is a symbol of the Electro Archon in Inazuma, because this is going to be important. This symbol only appears on Statue of the Seven or anything that is related to the Electro Archon, with one exception. So basically, as you can see here, this symbol is only appeared in-game. This symbol is only appeared in Rito and in the, I believe, the residence of the Electro Archon. These are generally appeared on drums, these 3 magamatas, and the ring with the drums with magatamas on them are generally appeared behind Statue of the Seven. However, there is one exception. When you first land in Rito, probably no one went back because you don't need to go there anymore, but near the first TP point in Rito, you'll find a fox statue with this symbol behind it, which is very interesting. And in fact, it is the only fox statue in entire Inazuma with this symbol behind it. Now this raises 2 questions. First, why is this symbol behind the fox? This is the symbol of the Electro Archon, of the God of Thunder. Why is this behind a fox statue? And secondly, why is this the only fox statue with this symbol on it? So before we need to talk about that, we need to talk about how the rest of the fox statues in Inazuma came to be. So this is going to be, I'm going to be basically spoiling the entire sacrificial offering quest. So if you have not done that, please click away. And basically within there is a name mentioned of a kitsune whose name is Sagu, and she is basically from the Hakushin family. The Hakushin means, I think, white something. Haku means white, of course. And the Hakushin is also the name used for the new craftable ring, the new craftable catalyst. So, which is why you also get the catalyst at the end of the quest. And this Kitsune, Sagu, served as one of the most trusted ally of the Raiden Shogun during the original one, of course, as alongside an Oni whose name is Chiyo. Both of them were the most trusted allies of the Raiden Shogun during her initial periods right after the Archon War, basically. Now, before we need to cover that part, we need to go even more further back on how Inazuma came to be, the entire nation. So, Inazuma, actually, none of the humans there started as humans, if that makes sense. The land of Inazuma, basically the Narukami Island, the main island Inazuma city and everything is on, started with only a bunch of Onis. The Onis were very festive and they pretty much don't worry about anything, they just do their own thing. There's only group there. The Onis are similar to the level of Kitsune, which means they are both capable of basic magics, transformations and things like that, per Japanese mythology settings. And the peace broke out when a group of Kitsune entered Inazuma by traveling on top of the sea, just by water walking, basically what Jesus did. But they came to Inazuma. They are quite advanced in the art of magic, so the foxes wanted a land of their own. They were basically told the Oni to split up the island. The Oni did not agree, so they fought for, according to the Chinese translation, they fought for 1,600 years. But the Chinese translation said 800 years, then 800 years. So I just did the math there. And after that point, apparently they just randomly decided to stop. There was no inherent reason, but they just decided to stop. As a result, the Onis gave the foxes, basically the Kitsunes, the land around the sacred Sakura tree, which is now known as Mount Yogu, and the Onis retreated to the Kinju forest, which is the forest just south of Ayaka's house. And by the way, at this point, both of them only had control over the Narukami Island, because all the other island had other sort of inhabitants. But this is where most of Inazuma's story begins, so I'm only focusing on this island. So another interesting to note is during their 1,600 years of fighting, because both groups are very skilled at transforming into random stuff, they kept on transforming up to the point where they don't realize what their original being was. Like, for example, an Oni would transform into this and that and this and that and this and that, up to the point where the Oni's like, am I really an Oni at this point? So basically what after that happened, a lot of them just transformed into humans and just started living normal lives, gave up the entire practice of magic and stuff like that. So basically, point is, the entire Inazuma people nation is Onis and foxes. Something like that. And long after the battle, basically the battle is settled between these two groups. The Archon War was also soon broke out, and then not long after that settled. Basically same thing as what happened in Liyue, but there was not much reference on the Archon War in Inazuma. And Saigu became one of the Kitsunes that served as an ally for the Raiden Shogun. And Saigu wanted the Raiden Shogun to acknowledge the Onis as well, but because of the Onis' personalities, they basically act like babies at all times and are never serious. What Saigu did was Saigu challenged Kichibushi, which is the giant Oni statue that was kind of sealed there, that used to be an actual Oni back then. She basically challenged him to steal knuckleweeds from the Raiden Shogun's yard. This Oni decided to do that, almost got murdered by the Raiden Shogun. However, the Raiden Shogun did manage to see his abilities and was quite impressed. And after that, Saigu talked her into getting this Oni to be the leader of all Onis and actually give him a job as the guardian of the Kinju forest, which is why he is kind of sitting there as a statue for now. And this was basically how these two started working for the government officials, if that makes sense. However, not long after this, Saigu herself died because there was another war, more like a civil war within Inazuma. It's referred to the war that painted the Inazuma seawater black, so it's a pretty horrible war. And before she left for battle, she was still thinking about her friend. She told this Oni that it's basically a hide and seek, and he should never come out until someone calls. Even if Saigu calls him, he should never come out. But after Sagu's death, this hide and seek basically became over. And because of that, all the foxes all the Kitsune in Inazuma, most of them turned into fox statues to wait for Sagu's return. The taller ones became the sky foxes, and the smaller ones became the earth foxes. That's why you can still see the fox statues around here. And when you look at them through Memento lens, you can unlock specific memories. That's why they are actually foxes that are turned into statues by their own will to preserve a part of their memory, so that when the Saigu becomes back, they can turn back into foxes again. Why talk about this? Since all the foxes in Inazuma are just now normal animals, they lost their ability to speak, everything is back to normal, so why talk about this? There is actually a fox that is still alive from that period in Inazuma, and of course that is Yae Miko. Now, she's not really a fox, I'll mention this later, but during her introduction back in 1.5, during the Chinese livestream at the end, basically Zhongli didn't tell us any useful information like he always did. But within the translations, we can pick out quite a bit of stuff, although he didn't tell us anything directly. So here is the original text translated by me, which I think that I did a very good job at. So thank you myself. So here is the exact translation. Zhongli says, a friend who once drank wine with the Archon Morax, a friend to, and he paused here, insert pause, then end pause, the Archon Baal. That was his first sentence. Then Yae-Miko introduces herself. I am the head shrine maiden or the priestess of the Grand Narukami Shrine, Yae-Miko. Then Zhongli said one more sentence. This Miss Kitsune is still like the old times. Can't see through her at all. That was the 3 sentences they had before Yae-Miko went on to tell us about the Inazuma Islands. Now this is the last fox we need, because this is the fox that is still alive during that period to all the way this period. So from her stories we can dig out quite a bit of stuff. Now a few questions regarding Zhongli's statement. First of all, why did Zhongli use the name Morax but not Zhongli or Rex Lapis? Now of course did not use Zhongli because Yae-Miko knows him as Morax previously before. However, Rex Lapis, which is his most popular name, is not used here because the difference between Morax and Rex Lapis is that Rex Lapis is his title and Morax is his actual name. So this means Yae-Miko knows him on a personal level, and this might also mean that Yae-Miko is on the same level as him as an Archon. This is why Yae-Miko can refer to him by his actual name. This is also why you never see any of the adapti in Liyue refer to Rex Lapis as Morax, because they are referring to him as Rex Lapis out of respect since they are one level below him. Rex Lapis is known as the prime adapti. So this is why that I believe Yae-Miko is at the same level as Morax. And finally, of course, the last question is why did he pause after saying Baal? Now, to answer this question, we must drill more into the name Baal. Unlike in Mondstadt and Liyue, in Mondstadt everyone calls Venti Barbados, who is his actual name, and in Liyue everyone calls Zhongli Rex Lapis, who is his actual title, which means Lord of Geo. Now, of course, there are still people who remember the group that originally was from Havlia's location, but then later got accepted by Zhongli. So those people call him Morax because they had no respect for him, so they call him by his real name. Whereas in Mondstadt, everyone's just like Lord Barbados. I mean, that's enough respect, so that's also okay. But the good question is the name Baal is never used in game so far, other than by Zhongli himself. Neither the locals nor any other foreigners in Inazuma calls Baal by the name Baal. Everyone calls him Raiden Shogun, who is her title. No one calls her by her actual name. Now, of course, if this is equivalent to Liyue's situation, you would think that someone like the Rebellion would like to call her by Baal because that's her actual name. But no one is doing that. And the reason I think for that is the Raiden Shogun actually knows that the name Baal does not refer to herself, so she stopped people from using this name because the name Baal actually refers to the previous Electro Archon. So with all of these added together, I believe we can make an easy equivalence statement, which means that Baal is the actual previous Electro Archon's name, whose current alias is Yae-Miko, and who is actually the previous Electro Archon, that's her title. Same case as Mondstadt. In Mondstadt, Barbados is the Anemo Archon's actual name, who goes by the alias Venti currently, and his actual title is the Anemo Archon. And in Liyue's case, Morax is the name of the Geo Archon, who goes by the alias Zhongli at the moment, and his actual title is either the Geo Archon or Rex Lapis, which if you translate to English means Lord of the Geo. Now some people might say that Yae-Miko knows Zhongli because she is the real owner of the Yae publishing house, which is the point I want to bring to next. It's the biggest publishing house, I believe, of Teyvat. At least at the moment it is. It is way more popular than any publishing house in Liyue and Mondstadt, and on top of that, it's the one that made Xinchu's book one of the best sellers in that publishing house. So we need to talk about why Yae-Miko is starting a publish house randomly. So if we talk to the shrine maiden Kano Nana at the Grand Narukami Shrine, she's near the back towards the right. If you're facing the Divine Secretary, she is directly to the right of you. Just have to walk around there, you'll find her. We basically find out that she is quite close with the Grand Priestess, who is Yae-Miko. And we learn from her that Yae-Miko's favorite hobby is actually reading light novels, unsurprisingly. It's basically how like Johnny became a consultant of the Wangshan funeral parlor so he can spend child's money unlimitedly, and Venti became a bard to sing at taverns because he likes to drink wine. Miko opened up this publishing house so she can read light novels for free because, you know, when the scripts get sent in, she gets to read them first and decide to publish them or not, but during that process she reads them for free. I believe this alone is enough to hint that she is one of the original 7. However, I will give more hints later words, but just saying this one is really hitting the flavor spot pretty quickly. So now we move on to when is the Yai publishing house founded. Now, most people might think that it's founded pretty recently, given that light novels, at least IRL, is not really a thing until recently. But in Inazuma's case, it actually founded pretty old while back. We can get the news of this from the book that is collectible in Inazuma. It's called the Toki Alley Tales. It's a book that you can actually grab from random people. The book talks about the romance between a cat and a dog. Now, of course, the cat and the dog are both like Kitsune level, so they can use magic and stuff like that. But for simplicity reasons, I'll refer to them as a cat and a dog. I have no interest in talking about their romance here, but just want to focus on the dog, because the dog does give quite a bit of good information. And also, just FYI, the dog is actually the dog actually later became like the dog's family later evolved into the Kujo clan of one of the 3 commissions. So just want to say that, which is why the Kujo actually has this like dog in their sort of description if you look deeper into it. So within this book, the dog talks about basically the entire backstory of Inazuma from his point of view. So I won't go over that again because we just talked about that. Basically summarized here, the Onis were originally the owners of Inazuma, then the Foxes came along, they fought for a long while, and afterwards they had a peace treaty and the land was split. But there was two important pieces of information to gather here. First is that the sacred Sakura tree belongs to the Kitsune at the moment. This is their location. The divine Sakura tree as well as the entire monk Yogu belongs to the Kitsune at the moment. However, the Onis does hold possession of the forest south of Ayaka's house. And the second piece of information here is that the divine Sakura tree is actually the power source of the Narukami. Now, of course, we know that Narukami Island is an island, but who is Narukami? In going back to IRL Japanese mythology, Narukami is another name for the Lord of Thunder or the God of Thunder or Lightning. However, in Genshin setup, I believe that Narukami and Raiden Shogun, at least in today's scenario, are referring to 2 different people. And I believe that the real Narukami in this case is Miko, and the current Raiden Shogun is the Raiden Shogun. See what I mean when they talk about 2 different people? Let me explain. So we all know that from the previous statement that the power of the Narukami comes from the divine Sakura tree. And a few stuff points to the fact that the divine Sakura tree is controlled by the Kitsune at the moment. We also know that all Sakura trees in Inazuma are just branches of this divine Sakura tree. All Sakura trees in Inazuma share the same roots. And we also know that the Raiden Shogun's army and rebellions are fighting in Yashori Island and also near Tatarasuma at the same time. And one more thing we know that is that the Raiden Shogun's army paid no attention to whether the divine Sakura trees or the branches of the Sakura tree are damaged or not. They just kept on fighting. And finally, if you're wandering around in Inazuma and you accidentally getting zapped by a tree, one of those special trees, after you get zapped enough times, you'll find a shrine maiden next to one of the trees that gives you a quest that helps you to restore all the trees. Now this means that both the Raiden Shogun's army nor the rebellion cares about the well-being of the tree, other than the shrine. Now why does the shrine care about the well-being of the tree? Because the tree is the power source of the Narukami. So that is good enough to link to the connection that the Narukami is not the Raiden Shogun, because otherwise the Raiden Shogun would need to pay close attention to the tree because that is her power source. Instead, the Narukami is actually in the Grand Narukami Shrine, And who is the highest person in the Grand Narukami Shrine? Bingo, it's Miko. So this, I believe, proves that the Miko is the Narukami. Now, of course, there is more hint behind. I'll go over a bit more, and we're almost over in case you're wondering how long this video is going to go. Going back to the book again, the dog also said he communicated with one of the elders of the Oni clan before. Now, given enough deduction here, I will skip this part because there's like a lot of information that won't be necessary later. But basically, given that, we can correctly anticipate that the dog's age is actually around the time when the original Raiden Shogun formed the Inazuma to before the war that washed the Sea Black broke out. And the Yai Publish House is actually already existing at this point, which means that the Yai Publishing House was basically came to be right after the formation of Inazuma, when Sagu the Kitsune was still alive. Now this means that Miko was already reading novels for free, i.e. being the owner of the publishing house at that point. But given at that point that Saigu is the Guji, or the priestess of the Grand Narukami Shrine, so what does that mean? Then that means Miko is not in that position at that time. So how is Miko? What position is she in at that point that doesn't have enough financial power to randomly form a publishing house for personal purposes? I believe this leads to the fact that again she is the Raiden Shogun at that point, which means she has the capability, both financially, to randomly produce a publishing house for her personal leisures. And finally, a few more hints. When talking to this NPC who is standing right in front of the gate of the Shogun's residence, basically as soon as you go skip the soldier that's going to trigger the cutscene to tell you to run, he is standing right there. If you talk to him, he tells you that out of the tri-commissions in Inazuma, the Yashiro Commission, who is coded by the Kamisato household, is the closest to the Raiden Shogun. Now that is not the case we actually seen in the actual in-game setup, because graphically they are one of the further ones away from the Raiden Shogun. For the record, if you do not know, the Kujo family, their residence is literally inside the Shogun's yard. The third commission, the commission that is in charge of tax and exporting and importing goods, their house is on Rito Island, and of course Kamisato Ayaka's house is directly under the Grand Narukami Shrine, which means that if we follow what this soldier said, that they are the closest to the actual Raiden Shogun, that means the actual Raiden Shogun is again in the Grand Narukami Shrine. And one more hint after that. The Kamisato as a family name. Kami means god or deity in Japanese, and Sato means house or home or hometown. So this means together Kamisato means the hometown of a god or the hometown of the deity. And for someone with this last name, it might as well mean that we're basically hinting at the fact that Miko, again, the leader of the Grand Narukami Shrine, is again the previous Electro Archon or a previous Electro Archon. And finally, from the point that when Toma's vision was taken, basically the Raiden Shogun should have known that Ayaka is interacting with the traveler behind her backs, and she's calling for a rebellion here and there. However, she couldn't really do anything about it. All she can do is take Toma's vision. That's all she did. If it was actually for the actual temper of the Raiden Shogun from what we have seen, she should probably have tried to take the entire Kamisato household's visions and probably execute them on top of that for being a traitor. Now of course nothing happened to the Kamisato household, and Ayaka is still doing fine staying in her house right now. And I believe all of this happens because someone powerful is behind the Kamisato household, in this case Miko, and the Raiden Shogun can't really do anything about it because of that. Finally, there is Miko's own speech within the Inazuma questline. Now, of course, it's only a few sentences, but within it, she basically calls the master who lost his vision similar to be like her friend, and she also calls him sort of useless or something along those lines, but in a very jokingly manner. Now, this basically looks like an elder sister or a mother figure calling her friend being like misbehaving in this case at least, and doesn't really want to punish her, was just kind of making fun of it. Now from this point of view, it basically means that either Miko is really close to Baal, to Raiden Shogun, to the point where she can make fun of her like this, or Miko is someone that Baal must pay respect, that the Raiden Shogun must pay respect with, otherwise she might get into trouble. That's the other reason why she can jokingly just say stuff like that, and then the Baal has to kind of just suck it up and not do anything about it. And of course, finally, there is the physical proof in game that Yae looks like the actual statue that Baal is constructing. So that is all the proofs I have for why Miko might be the actual Raiden Shogun, or the real Electro Archon. And finally, just because we have gone through this already together, we might as well put together the brief history behind Inazuma. So of course, they first started by the Onis owning the Narukami Island, and then the Kitsunes arrived. They fought for 1,600 years, and a bunch of them turned into humans. And on top of that, a bunch of others turned into demons. I did not mention that previously. Finally, at the end of the war, the Kitsunes gained control over the Grand Narukami Shrine, the location there, and the Onis gained control over the forest directly south of Kamisato's household. So that's the first part. The second part is that not long after that, the Archon War broke out. Someone by the name called her Raiden Shogun, and then ended up, who is an Archon of course, or an Archon level person in this case, and ended all the chaos in Inazuma, bringing peace to the land of Inazuma. She is basically crowned the Electro Archon and chose the eternity of the Inazuma people as the primary goal that she will fight for. That's basically the formation of Inazuma. Now, right after that, similar to the situation of Osio, but a little bit more calmly, there is still another Archon in power in Inazuma, and he is none other than the Giant Serpent. He actually had a name in Chinese. It translates to Arabus. I don't know what's the English name. I haven't seen this English name in game ever, so I will keep calling him the Giant Serpent. He is basically another Archon level power being. Basically, I call him an Archon if you do that in Chinese. So that is what he will be called. So he basically wanted to talk with Raiden about the case that he wants a bit of land for his followers, so his followers doesn't have to stay in the sun, in areas without sunlight. But for some reason, the conference did not go very well, and they end up fighting. And like the fact that Guizhang died during the Archon War protecting Liyue, Sagu died during the war protecting Inazuma, and this is the war that is known as the war that washed the sea black. Basically black as in all the blood is draining from that. And Raiden made her final move in the end and cut Yashuri Island in half. As a result, the serpent is killed. However, the leftover blood and stuff from the serpent started to form crystal marrows, which is found on the island. It is considered a form of malice, and it slowly started to poison the sakura trees on the island. And as a result, the Raiden, which is the Raiden Shogun's source of power. So like Venti's revolution, the Raiden Shogun's best friend Sagu died in battle, and because of this malice, some of her best allies have turned against her, getting affected by this malice and turning them against her. And the Raiden Shogun starts to doubt herself and whether that she should continue being the Electro Archon. Finally, between the eternity of her throne and the eternity of the people of Inazuma, she picks a latter option, stepped down from the position of the Raiden Shogun, took the form of her former friend, who is basically Sagu, and named herself after her favorite publishing house, the E Publishing House, and she called herself E Miko. And now she works the job that her old friend used to do, which is the priestess of the Narukami Shrine. So that basically summarizes up the entire story of Inazuma so far, at least in my point of view. Of course, this is just theory, but I believe that I have offered as much hint as I can to back it up. However, there is still a few less important things about the theory cannot cover up. For example, why does the current Raiden Shogun want to start a division hunt decree? Like, there was basically no reason to explain why this starts. Now, of course, we can all poke at the Fatui for doing this, and this is going to be another 20 extra minutes long, but I believe that's all I want to cover for this video because it's already 40 minutes long. But finally, for one more point, which is actually somewhat of a joking point, but it does make sense, is that all Archons so far obey the form of their slimes, if that makes sense. Venti is able to fly by holding his E, because animal slimes fly. Zhongli is able to create a shield by holding his E, because geo slimes create shields. And what's special about Electro Slimes? There are two types of them. There is the normal purple Electro Slime and there is the yellow mutated Electro Slime. So does this mean that there is two Electro Archons? Now of course, if that comes true, I would be expecting the Dendro Slimes to come with basically their own speakers, if that makes sense. All of us know how annoying they are. Just making a joke here. But this slime theory actually does make sense so far, but it's only 2 examples, so it might be coincidence. We will see in the end, because after all the Archons and Slimes are considered the most fundamental elemental forms of beings, so it makes sense that their source of power are similar when demonstrated. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you like the video, please drop a like or leave a comment or consider subscribing. It will help me a lot. The amount of research and recording that went into this video is probably one of the big ones I've done so far. So thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. Thank you and have a nice day.